Okay, darlings, we are going to be talking about loyalty today in the Odyssey. And here's a little life lesson for you. It's not about who is real in your face, it's about who stays loyal behind your back. Keep that in mind when you're choosing your friends. This is especially true in the Odyssey. We're going to talk about four different people. Well, three people and an animal. Let's start with Penelope. She is probably the most stubbornly loyal, faithful person in the entire story. She stays faithful to Odysseus for 20 years, even though he's not there. She is fiercely loyal to him. And we see this in a variety of ways. Probably the biggest one that's not really talked about, but that we see evidence of, is in her raising of Telemachus. And we see that because she constantly brings forward in the book, maybe not so much in our version, but in the original story, she brings forward stories about Odysseus and how he deals with things. And this helps Telemachus understand the kind of man that his father was. And then when the suitors come in, she works really hard to keep them at arm's length away from her so that she will not compromise her wedding vows. She will not compromise her faithfulness. So they are there. She has to welcome them. That's part of hospitality. But when they begin to overstay their welcome, she finds things that make her busy, like the weaving of the shroud for her father-in-law. And she keeps them just far enough away that they can't actually physically get to her. Another way that we see that Penelope has a lot of loyalty for Odysseus is that she really wants to get any information about him that she can. And we kind of get a sense of this when Odysseus comes in as the beggar and he's in his disguise, and she sits down and speaks with this very lowly person because he has some information about Odysseus. Now, that's not the only reason. I mean, that's part of the hospitality that is expected, that is offered to everyone who comes in. But she takes extra care and extra time to hear him and to learn about any news that anyone has of Odysseus. Very, very last thing that we see where Penelope's loyalty to Odysseus just absolutely shines through is when she respects his wishes for her. Telemachus has come back. He now has a beard. The deal was, if Telemachus has a beard and Odysseus has not returned, Odysseus has asked her to find another husband. This goes way against Penelope's wishes, but it is the last gift, the last ounce of loyalty that she can give to Odysseus by respecting his wishes. And this is when she sets up the axes for the suitors to have to draw and shoot a bow through. Let's move on to Telemachus, because he is also one that shows fierce loyalty toward his father, even though he has never met him apart from the days of his birth, which he probably wouldn't remember. But Telemachus defends Odysseus' honor left, right, and center. He's constantly trying to become the man that Odysseus was and to emulate this mighty man that he has kind of grown up around these stories. So, a lot like Penelope, every chance he gets, he just longs for any information about him. He wants to know about his exploits. He wants to know about the battles that he fought. He wants to know about Odysseus from a bunch of different sources. And we see that especially when he goes off and he's in search of Odysseus as he goes on his trip to try to find him. In all ways and in everything, though, Telemachus honors his memory. And we see this in a variety of ways, but at the end of the book, you will see how he stands with his father and defends what Odysseus has worked for. And we also see it in the way that every day he strives to be more and more like his father. Let's talk about Eumaeus. Now, Eumaeus is a really cool character because he is of lowly birth. He is a servant in the house of Odysseus, but we see the way, we get a sense of the way that Odysseus respected Eumaeus, and the way that that respect was reciprocated by the way that Eumaeus also works hard to protect Odysseus's reputation and his property. We see it in the way that he treats others. He doesn't have a whole lot, and yet when Odysseus comes as a beggar in disguise, he still offers him the same hospitality that he can because of his memory of Odysseus and his respect for Odysseus. So every chance he gets, and maybe, when people ask about him, or even when they don't ask, he's happy to tell others about Odysseus and to speak well of him. And in so doing this, and in his actions, in his speech, he honors Odysseus. Again, at the end of the chapter, Eumaeus is one of the men that will stand by Odysseus and fight beside him. Now, the last character that we are going to meet here is Argos. This little dog touches my heart every time I read the Odyssey. It really gets in my heart. The thing you need to know about Argos is that Argos was still in his puppy phase when Odysseus left. Now, he was beyond the very young puppy phase. He was kind of like, a tween dog, maybe a year and a half old, maybe 2 years old when he left. But there was a very good bond between them. And again, you don't really get that sense in the book that we are reading because there's just not enough time. But in the original work, it talks about how Argos worked so hard for his master. He was always at his side when he would go hunting. He would protect him. He would, run after the game or whatever and bring them down. But he worked really, really hard for Odysseus, and they have a very special bond. And so when Eumaeus brings Odysseus up to the house, there, sitting on the dung heap, or in some versions on the trash, is this very, very old dog. He looks terrible. He's emaciated. He's covered in flies. He is literally on death's door. But the really touching thing, there's a couple of very touching things here, but it is Argos who is the first to really, truly recognize Odysseus. Even through his disguise. It doesn't matter that he is disguised as a beggar. Argos knows his master. And we kind of get a very brief sense of how Argos has been treated by where he is sitting. And this is possibly the way he's been treated by the suitors and by their servants. Pushing this dog out to make room for them and their dogs, even though he's the dog of the house. But Argos has waited for Odysseus to return home. He had a sense that Odysseus was going to set foot on Ithaca again, and he would not die until he had seen his master. It's such a touching picture. And I think that's why it's so important that we understand that there is this loyalty there in and among these people that we see, because it plays in sharp contrast to how the suitors behave toward Odysseus and toward his memory, even though Odysseus was the one who ultimately ended the war because it was his idea that was the Trojan horse. So all of these people, suitors, are home because of Odysseus, and yet they are so dishonorable to his memory. And that's why these people are so important. All right, darlings, there it is. Told you I would keep it short. Be safe, be well.